Few companies can say they have survived for more than a century. Even fewer can claim to have completely transformed an industry. And hardly any have managed to reinvent themselves time and again after teetering on the brink of failure. Nintendo did not start out making consoles, or video games, or even electronic toys. When it was founded, automobiles were just beginning to appear, and electricity had not yet reached many homes. Over the course of more than 135 years, Nintendo has weathered world wars, economic crises, costly blunders, commercial failures, and fierce competition, but whenever it seemed defeated, it found a new way to surprise the world. This is the incredible story of Nintendo, the company that reinvented video games time and again. Our story begins long before Mario, Zelda, or Pokémon. In 1889, a Japanese craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi founded a small company in the city of Kyoto. His business was manufacturing traditional Japanese playing cards known as hanafuda. These cards were used in family games and social gatherings. No one could have imagined that this small factory would, more than a century later, become an entertainment giant. Hanafuda cards were handcrafted to a high standard of quality. They soon began to be sold throughout Japan. Nintendo grew slowly, building a reputation based on craftsmanship and attention to detail. It was a philosophy that would remain with the company for decades. Over the years, the playing card market began to stagnate. Nintendo needed to find new opportunities. Its president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, was convinced that relying on a single product was too risky. A period of experimentation began. The company tried all kinds of businesses. A taxi company, instant rice, hotels, toys, even services that were unconventional for the time. Most of these projects failed. Losses were mounting, and the future was uncertain. However, one of those experiments would change history. Nintendo began manufacturing innovative toys. And it was there that a young engineer with extraordinary creativity appeared. His name was Gunpei Yokoi. While working at the factory, Gunpei Yokoi built an extendable mechanical arm to amuse himself. When Hiroshi Yamauchi saw it, he was fascinated. Instead of reprimanding him, he asked him to turn the idea into a commercial product. That is how the Ultra Hand was born. It was a huge success. Millions of units were sold. Nintendo discovered that it could succeed by creating fun experiences. Gunpei Yokoi had a very distinctive way of thinking. He did not seek out the most advanced technology. He preferred to use existing technology in completely new ways. Years later, that philosophy would define many of Nintendo's greatest successes. In the early 1970s, video games began to attract attention. Most Japanese companies viewed the phenomenon with curiosity. Nintendo decided to take a chance. At first, it manufactured arcade machines. Later, it began developing its own video games. During this period, another name appeared that would change history. Shigeru Miyamoto. An industrial designer with a passion for drawing, music, and storytelling. No one imagined he would end up creating some of the most famous characters on the planet. In 1981, Nintendo urgently needed a hit. One of its games had failed in the United States. Miyamoto was tasked with repurposing existing hardware to create something completely new. That is how Donkey Kong was born. The protagonist was a carpenter who had to rescue a young woman from a huge gorilla. That character did not yet have the name we know today. Everyone simply called him Jumpman. Later, he would become Mario. Donkey Kong was a phenomenon. Nintendo had finally found a global star. And Mario was just beginning his journey. In 1983, one of the greatest crises in the history of entertainment occurred. The video game market collapsed. Too many low-quality games. Too many consoles. Consumers lost confidence. Many companies went out of business. Experts claimed that video games were a passing fad. While everyone was fleeing the industry, Nintendo did exactly the opposite. It decided to launch a new console. The family computer. known outside Japan as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. Nintendo knew that regaining trust would be difficult. That is why it established very strict rules for developers. Only games that met high-quality standards could be published. It was an unpopular decision. But it worked. Super Mario Bros. Arrived in 1985. The game redefined the platformer genre. And it turned Mario into the face of Nintendo. Millions of people bought the console just to play it. Thanks to the success of the NES and titles like Mario and The Legend of Zelda, the video game industry regained public confidence. Nintendo didn't just save the company. It helped rescue an entire market. In 1989, Nintendo surprised everyone once again. It introduced the Game Boy. Many criticized its monochrome screen. Competitors offered more advanced graphics. But Nintendo had a different priority. Battery life, price, and fun. Years later, Pokémon Red and Blue arrived. The Pokémon phenomenon turned the Game Boy into a legend. Children all over the world traded creatures, competed, and dreamed of becoming Pokémon masters. But success attracts competition. First came Sega. Then Sony appeared with the original PlayStation. And later, Microsoft joined the fray with the Xbox. Nintendo no longer dominated alone. Some strategic decisions did not yield the expected results. The Nintendo 64 stuck with cartridges when the competition adopted CDs. Later on, the GameCube also failed to lead in sales. Many analysts began to wonder if Nintendo had lost its way. Instead of competing to have the most powerful console, Nintendo did something unexpected. It changed the rules of the game. In 2006, it introduced the Wii. A console that allowed games to be controlled by moving one's body. Many experts were skeptical. But millions of families were fascinated. Grandparents, parents, and children could play together. Nintendo found a completely new audience. The Wii sold more than 100 million units and put Nintendo back at the top of the industry. After the success came another setback. The Wii U failed to win over the public. Sales were far below expectations. Many thought Nintendo would fall behind again. In 2017, Nintendo launched a different kind of console. The Nintendo Switch. It could be used as a home console or a handheld. It was two devices in one. The Switch was an immediate success. Games like The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild and Animal Crossing, New Horizons won over millions of players. Nintendo had reinvented itself once again. While other companies competed for more realistic graphics or more powerful consoles, Nintendo took a different path. Its priority was always the same: fun. Mario, Link, Zelda, Kirby, Pokémon, Donkey Kong. These characters have accompanied several generations and are part of popular culture worldwide. Nintendo's history proves that success doesn't depend solely on technology, it depends on creativity, on the willingness to take risks, and on the courage to do things differently. A company that started out making paper playing cards in the 19th century went on to become one of the biggest names in the history of entertainment. It survived wars, economic crises, commercial failures, and increasingly fierce competition. And every time the world thought Nintendo had lost the battle, the company found a new way to surprise us. Because Nintendo never just created video games. It created memories. It created adventures. And, above all, it created entire generations of gamers who still believe that, with a little imagination, any world is possible. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Nintendo's history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to discover more fascinating stories about the companies that changed the world.